Welcome to this meeting of the Mind, Technology, and Society Seminar Series, the oldest speaker series here at the University of California, Merced. This series is brought to you by the Cognitive and Information Sciences Group and is kindly sponsored by the School of Social Sciences, Humanities, and Arts, as well as the Glushko Samuelson Foundation. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Professor Art Markman. He is somebody that actually has an undergraduate degree in cognitive science, got his PhD in Illinois. He's now on the faculty at the University of Texas at Austin, where, among many other things, he's the director of the Human Dimensions in Organizations group. Art is a previous executive officer of the Cognitive Science Society, a previous executive editor of the Cognitive Science Journal. Hopefully he feels at home here. At least we didn't scare him away the first time. This is not his first visit to campus. He came and joined us for our Future of Cognitive Science conference some years ago. Art always has interesting and wise things to say. The one that's coming to my mind right now happened at a cognitive modeling conference at George Mason University when Chris Kello was still there, where Art stood up in front of the collected participants of the conference and announced that undergraduate psychology majors should be banned, that undergraduates should learn useful skills, and then they can study cognition when they get to graduate school. So with that, please join me in welcoming Professor Art Markman.
I was thinking this is actually my third time on this campus. The first time I was here, there were like 3 buildings and cows. Now there's like 12 buildings and cows. Some things are moving along. It's great to be here. One of the nice things about getting older is you reach a point in your career where you don't have to impress anybody. So you don't have to pick like the highly polished project that you've got all the answers for. Instead, you can talk about something that's fun that you're working on right now and then get people's feedback on it. So that's what I'm going to do today. And this is going to be an example of, I don't know, this isn't quite me-search, but it's inspired by something that happened to me-search, I think, is the way we're going to call this. And this is work that I did with Dan Willard, who was a great graduate student who's now working in the Bay Area, and Marlone Henderson, one of my colleagues at the University of Texas. And it was motivated by a real event. And here's the real event. About 2.5, 3 years ago, I got tired of the traffic in Austin. Austin actually has horrible traffic, unlike Merced. And so I decided to move closer to downtown. And so I was looking at houses, and there was a house that we really liked that had been on the market for about a year, in a real estate market in which houses were, generally speaking, being snapped up in weeks. And so we were like, what's wrong with this house that it hasn't sold? And it turns out what was wrong with the house was that the guy who was selling it thought he had $1 million house, which he did not. What had happened was he went to a variety of realtors and said, I want to sell my house for $1 million. And the realtors all said to him, you're never going to sell your house for $1 million. And so he would just keep going. And he finally found a guy who sells a ton of houses in that neighborhood. And said, I want to sell my house for $1 million. The guy said, fine. And he listed it for $1 million, where it sat for 7 months. And then he dropped the price to $925, and it sat for several more months. And then he dropped it again, and finally got to the point where we bought it at substantially less than $1 million. And I was trying to think to myself, why would an agent agree to sell a house for a price he knew he couldn't possibly sell it for, and then hold on to it for this amount of time, where this guy paid, another year and change worth of money on the house? What benefit would there be to this agent in the long run, right? You get that particular sale, but just like in any business, you can't make a living by selling something to somebody once. You have to sell something to people all the time in order to succeed. How would this be a benefit to him? Was this a benefit to him, or did he do something really stupid? So I was just complaining about this at the beginning of lab meeting, as I'm wont to do, as those of you who know me well. will know. And so I said to one of my students, that's a really interesting question. I said, Greg, go into the literature and find me what we know about, that's why you have graduate students, right? Go and find me what we know about how people evaluate the agents who negotiate on your behalf. And a week later, he came back and said, we know nothing. And I went, this is my favorite thing, a gap in the literature, right? Something that nobody's looked at. So we said, all right, let's study the way that people evaluate agents who negotiate on their behalf. So that's what we did, and now you get to hear about it. So what's going on, right? What is the best way, if you're an agent, right? What is the best way to present yourself? And if you're someone who's engaging with an agent, what do you end up doing? So one possibility is honesty is the best policy, right? Which, current events in the world would tell you must be true. So if honesty is the best policy, what that would say is, as an agent, I should give you my best estimate of what I think I can do for you, and then I should follow through on that. And to the extent that I am accurate in what I say, and accurate in what I am able to accomplish, that's how you should like me best, and you should be most likely to use me again and pass my name on to other people. So maybe honesty is the best policy. Another possibility is that there's an optimism bias, that what we really want are experts, agents who are the most optimistic about what we can get. And then another possibility is that there's kind of a self-similarity bias, that what I want is an agent who's just like me. Okay, who believes things just like I do. Okay, so what we're going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk primarily about what happens, and then I'll speculate a little on why. The why is the thing we're still working on, which is why I like giving this talk, because then people can make suggestions about the why that I can go test and then give you a thanks in the acknowledgement. Okay, so there's space in the acknowledgements available of a paper to be named later. Okay. So how could we do this? So how did we do this? We did this with a variety of different kinds of lab studies that involved several different kinds of situations, some of which were situations where we did the study in the lab and had participants who had somebody else negotiating on their behalf, and where the participant would express an outcome that they wanted in a situation. They would have a choice of agents, where those agents would some of them would offer what that they said they could get what the participant wanted. Some of them said they could get more. Some of them said they could get less. We varied it in different studies. And then there was a negotiation. Generally speaking, people are overly optimistic about what they can get, so they get less than they think that they can get. How does that affect their beliefs about the agent? Would they use that agent again? Are they satisfied with that agent? That's the real question, and we want to know, what is it that drives satisfaction? Is it primarily the outcome that you get, or is it something else, like that initial agreement that led you to use that agent in the first place? That's sort of the big question. And then ultimately, why does this happen? And we have a little bit on that, but mostly on the first part. Okay, first study, we had a bunch of people playing a variant of the dictator game. The dictator game is one of these game theory games in which basically I get, if I'm playing the dictator game, you give me $10. Let's say I'm playing with Spivey over here. I get $10, and I can allocate the $10 any way I want. I'm the dictator. I can keep it all myself. I could split it evenly. I could give him all of it. I could do whatever I want. That's the game. But it's a variant of the dictator game in which you have an agent who negotiates on your behalf, who goes to the dictator and says to the dictator why a particular split is what you ought to get. Okay? That's the way this game is going to be played. So the proposer is given $10. They get to split what they want with their client. And then there's a representative who's going to try and get as much as they can for their client by saying, oh, he's a nice guy. He's really, really, really wonderful. You should give him a lot of money. And then there's a client who's going to choose a representative to negotiate on their behalf. Now, we did this in a big class in which everybody's sitting at a computer doing this over the web, and we tell everybody that some of them are going to be clients, and some of them are going to be representatives, and some are going to be proposers. And then now it turns out that the representatives are all pre-programmed. Okay, so when you're choosing a representative, you're choosing one that you're getting a choice among things that we've selected for you. Okay? There are 4 initial studies I'm going to talk about. Many of them are going to use this format, although you're going to see we're going to switch. We started using MTurk after a while because apparently that's how you do psychology research now. The first two studies are going to focus on an optimism, are going to test optimism and self-similarity. Then we're going to try and distinguish those two, okay? Because initially we're going to give you agents, representatives who agree with you. Then we're going to actually test between someone who agrees with you and someone who's overly optimistic. And then we're going to start with the why. And then I have some other studies at the end that'll pick up some other fun stuff that I'll go through really quickly. Okay, so how's this going to work? Just so you know, if you're the client in this, which are the participants we care about in this study, you're going to start by having this situation described to you, so that you're, the proposer's getting $10. How much do you want to get? And it's fascinating how much money people think they're going to get. Okay, I just want to point that out. We're going to get to that. And then they're going to get two potential representatives, one of whom is going to be somebody who agrees with them, and one of whom is going to be realistic about what they're actually going to get. And this is all programmed in, so we know what they're actually going to get, which is less than they wanted. Okay, then they're going to find out how much they earned, okay, which is less than they wanted, and then they're going to evaluate their representative. They're going to evaluate their agent, both in terms of how satisfied are you, and would you use this person again, okay? And so what's going to happen is we do two trials on this. On the first trial, okay, they're going to ask for whatever they ask for, which is we're going to see is a lot. They're going to get $2, okay? So, if I'm the dictator here, I'm a nice guy. I'm only giving you 2 out of my 10. And then they're going to have a chance to play this game again, where they say how much they want, and then they're only going to get $1, okay? And each time they're going to evaluate their agent, okay? So, if we think about the, there's two important measures here. There's an agreement measure and an outcome measure. The agreement measure is essentially, to what degree does the agent who bids for my services agree with what I say I want, okay? And then there's performance, which is to what degree does that agent actually get what they say they're going to get, okay? And if I'm asked, and because the participants in this experiment, generally speaking, asked for a lot, generally speaking, their agents are going to underperform. Okay? All right. And there's 2 trials to give people an opportunity to use this person again. So what happens? First of all, I want to point out people are really optimistic about this game. On average, they think they're going to get $4.41. And this reflects a whole bunch of people who thought they were going to get more than half. Okay? Good luck with that. In Texas. Okay? Just wanted to point that out. Generally speaking, on a scale from 1 to 7, people weren't that satisfied. I want to point that out. They weren't hugely satisfied. And a lot of people do choose new representatives. Okay? So all of this is in the context of if you absolutely do a terrible job, you're not going to do that well. Okay? But we're picking a fairly extreme situation here. The question is at the margins, is there value to having agreed with this other person? Okay? And the answer is yes. And it affects things in a couple of ways. First of all, in this first study, you got 2 potential agents. One of whom was agreed with you more or less. So we took what you said you wanted and we gave you one option, which was somebody who more or less said, I can get you what you want. And another person who was more realistic. They were actually pretty close to that $2. I think I can get you $2. Okay? 100% of people in both trials of the experiment pick the more optimistic person who agrees with them. So, first things first, you're not going to get the job if you don't give a somewhat rosy picture of what you can get. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, does your performance and does this agreement affect the evaluation? We have 2 measures. We do a regression analysis on all this. There's a measure, a rating of satisfaction, and then there's also you can do a logistic regression on do I pick a new representative or not? And what's most important to see is yes, performance matters. So so I'm more satisfied if you perform well for me, but I'm also more satisfied if you agreed with me. So you get a bit of a halo there. There is an effect of that. And the worse my performance is, the less that the more likely I am to use a new agent, and the less you agree with me, the more likely I am to use a new agent. So both of them play a role. So that's the first study. We did this again. So we did this again in the lab. So the first one we did in a class, because that's how you get 60 people all at once. Then we did one in the lab. Same kind of study, only we did this one several times. So and so again, we have, people are guessing what they're going to get, okay? And we have one agent who's going to agree all the time. We have another one who's going to be accurate all the time. And they're going to play this thing repeatedly, okay? Which is great, because you could ask, does this effect go away after a while? You might think it would go away. You might think that. Okay, you're going to choose one of the two representatives and you're going to evaluate. What happens is, again, performance. The worse you perform, I downgrade you for bad performance. But if you agree with me, I like you. Again, all right. So there's still a benefit for agreeing, which also holds for whether you keep the representative from trial to trial. Okay? And here's the beauty of this. This experiment goes on for 30 trials, and the effect persists throughout the entire study. You'd think eventually people would learn that being overly optimistic isn't a good thing, and they don't.
Just quick clarification. So in the first study, they got $2, then they got $1.
Yeah.
When you did it for 30 rounds, what happened?
Good question. Yeah. So what we did there was it was a random draw on a distribution that was lower than what you said you were going to get. So you were always getting less than you wanted, and your hope goes down a little bit, but not that much. So 30 trials in, you're still hoping for $3.50, and you're still trying to get an agent who's going to get you $3.50, even though and you're sticking with your agent who's repeatedly getting you $1.25. I mean, and you like them. Okay? I mean, I know there's an analogy here somewhere, and I'm just not going to go for it.
Related to question number one. So, first of all, do you get to switch back and forth between them so you can see what each of them are going to get you versus what they say they're going to get you?
You could. You were allowed to. You don't. Much.
Well, and what you said is that it's not beneficial to keep the one who's being optimistic, but does it penalize you at all? You're never going to do worse with it.
It's going to penalize you in about 20 minutes. In this study, it does not. But I'm going to show you where this goes bad. So, in this particular study, it doesn't hurt you. But I'm going to show you that this kind of blind adherence to somebody who's overly optimistic can be a problem. Yes?
The question about the agreement, you were talking earlier about how the rate at which, or how much someone agreed with you. So when you said you were they're roughly getting close to what you want, how were you doing that?
So at the very beginning, I say I want $3.50.
Right.
So you've just told me I want $3.50. We now get to determine what your agents look like.
Right.
So we give you one of them who says I can get you $3.50, and the other one says I can get you $2.
Okay. So the agreement agent is always exactly what you wanted, right?
Plus or minus a couple of cents, so that it's not obvious that every trial they're getting you exactly what you want.
Okay. So then I guess my main question is, because earlier on one of the graphs it had the amount of agreement, how much someone agrees with you, affects how you like. Shouldn't that be that's essentially binary if they always agree with you or within 1 or 2 cents of you, right? Scalar.
Yeah. So it's the amount of so some of this was the amount of agreement, right? And the other was so that you pick the agent who agreed with you 100% of the time on the first trial, but then on the second trial, some people switch. So
so the amount of agreement is how often you pick the agent who agreed with you, not how much they agreed with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to clarify one more time.
Yes, please.
So in that first one, the agent who agreed with you was also always the agent who had the higher offer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so we're stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. All right. So far, interim summary, so far, the representative who agrees with you is most likely to get the job. Underperforming hurts your evaluations to some degree, right? So this isn't a world in which there's no penalty for you as an agent for underperforming. But that penalty for underperforming is attenuated to the degree that you agreed with the individual. Okay. Now we're going to do this again, 30 trials, choice between 2 agents. Now there's 2 agents, one of whom is optimistic. They're literally going to give you 110% of what you asked for. The other one is going to agree with you. So now the question is, do I pick the person who agrees with me? Do I want someone like me? Or do I want someone who's optimistic? Because so far it was ambiguous. Okay, that was right. Again, 30 trials. The choice of agent is about equally split, right? So some people go for the person who was most optimistic. Some people went for the person who agreed with them. But people are most satisfied with the optimistic agent's outcome, even though they're underperforming. Okay? And if you look at who's most likely to get selected again, it tends to be the most optimistic agent rather than the agreed agent, even though the person who agrees with you is underperforming less than the person who's more optimistic. So we like people who are going to give us 110%. I will say we haven't done the study yet. I'm pretty sure this effect will disappear at some point. At some point you're going to say that's totally realistic. The agent who says, I'm going to get you all $10, maybe not, right? Maybe that person, at some point I believe this will fall apart. We want to do that study, we just haven't done it yet. So I do believe at some point this doesn't work, but 110% seems to work. Okay, so far, why is this? So we seem to give some kind of a halo to people who feel like they're going to get us a lot of what we want, and that halo, once gotten, is hard to break. Right? Once I feel good about you, I continue to feel good about you, even though the thing I hired you to do turns out to be the thing you can't do. And people who are, which means if you're seeking a client, you should err on the side of optimism. Okay? And so now we want to know, well, so what's going on here? Okay? All right. So now we're going to switch context a little bit and run some stuff on MTER. We wanted to see if we could, so we did all these studies so far in the lab or in classes. And the problem with doing things in the lab and classes, it take forever. And if you want to run a bunch of studies really quickly, is there another way to do it? Now, because we did this stuff in the lab, we actually could make it look like there was a real negotiation going on. That was the beauty of it. In fact, when you came into the lab, what we told you was the people who were, I didn't tell you this, but I'll tell you this now. We told everyone came to the lab, the people who were negotiating on your behalf, they are actually students in a business school class focused on negotiation on the other side of campus. And their grade depends on how effectively they negotiate. Okay? Which people actually got a little upset at. They were like, I said, don't worry, your evaluations of them aren't going to affect their grade. It's just how well they do. Because when we first pilot tested this, people were like, I got to give them a good evaluation. I don't want to screw up anybody's grade. So we had to tell them, your evaluations aren't going to screw up their grade. Their screwing up is going to screw up their grade. That's what we told them. And then later we told them. They were just bots. So they don't have feedback. Yet. Okay, so we did this with MTER. It was a simulated negotiation. We had 100 people in this. Now we used a house selling vignette. Okay, and so we told people you're selling a house. This is how much you expect to get, and we told people it's a story because we just want to be totally upfront with people. This is what's going on to see if you still get the effect. Like, can people simulate this situation and still have this happen? Once again, we have two agents. Okay. So we have offers and outcomes that are, and in this case, everyone got an option of two agents. Some people got an agent who was going to give you 110% of what you expected to get. Some were going to get you exactly what you wanted to get. Some were below. Accurate. okay, but below. And one of the things that we're going to ask people for is their assessment of the opening price that the agent is going to ask for. And the reason for this is because we're interested in the question, do people think that their agent is working hard on their behalf? And one way you can work hard on someone's behalf is by being aggressive in the negotiation, asking for a lot of money, right? So is this agreement affecting people's beliefs about how aggressive their agent is going to be? So what happens? So we want to know about, so really the question is optimism being used by people as a proxy for aggressiveness of the agent? So are you inferring a quality of the agent from just what they offered to get for you? And so what we want to know is essentially, from a regression standpoint, can we predict satisfaction from some combination of how well they performed, the optimism, and their beliefs about this opening price that they're going to get, as well as whether choosing a new representative is affected by that. And we also want to know, just from the standpoint of being able to do a bunch of studies on MTurk later, can you actually get this effect from people who you're not deceiving into thinking that they're in a real negotiation? Okay. And the answers to these questions are, satisfaction is being determined primarily by performance and optimism. Again, that your beliefs about the opening price not having a huge effect on satisfaction, and again, same thing with choosing a new representative. So it's performance and optimism. And by the way, the same thing is true if we ask explicitly about aggression. Oh no, but if we ask But if we ask explicitly about aggression, which we also did, so we asked both for their judgment of the opening question. We also asked how aggressive do you think this person is going to be. They actually basically thought they were more. That they actually, what happens is they actually think that that their agent is going to be more aggressive on their behalf when they say that they're going to get them more, and that aggression ends up having a big influence on how satisfied they are. And the same thing ends up being true for how likely they are to use that person again. Okay? So what's going on here is, what's important about this is to recognize that what's happening is, if I come out and say, I'm going to get you more than what you want, okay? I get the job, and you believe in me. You think this person's going to be aggressive, and to the extent you think I'm going to be aggressive, which you think because I made an optimistic prediction, you then like me better later, despite the fact, this is what I love, despite the fact that I underperform for you. Okay? So I'm more like, if you think I'm aggressive on your behalf, you think I'm fighting for you, even though I fail. Okay? You use me again. Yes?
So I'm curious a little bit about the criteria for underperforming in that regard.
Yeah.
Because, if I'm under the impression that my agents out there are fighting on my behalf as hard as they can, then my returns, regardless of what they are going to reflect the effort that they
Yes, you don't get to run the control condition. That's right. I mean, that's the beauty of life. Is that your beliefs about the situation have a big influence on the attributions you make about what's going to happen, because you don't get to run your own control condition. You don't get to say, let me split this into two quantum worlds, one of which I picked the agent who agreed with me, and the other one who I picked the agent who was more realistic, and discover that I got the same amount both times. Right? And so far, what we have is kind of a weird phenomenon. Okay? But the question is, so what, in some ways, in that it doesn't hurt. Right? Couldn't hurt, right? Now, in the real world situation that I described at the beginning, it did hurt the guy who had his house on the market for over a year, because he had to pay over a year's worth of additional mortgage on that house. And actually, in his case, as it turns out, there was an opportunity cost. He wanted to move, and he couldn't move, And the housing market was getting hotter in Austin as this was going on. And so he was losing tremendous amounts of money, both in terms of the additional mortgage interest he was paying, as well as the houses that he was no longer able to afford because he was sitting waiting. Okay? So there was a real cost, and we're going to get to that because I want to show you that this actually is going to have a cost. But I want to just talk about a couple of things here to help clarify this effect a little bit. One of which is we want to know, is this effect caused by having to make a choice between two agents? Or is it just that an agent agrees with you? Because you could imagine that there's a dissonance effect here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about just this quick thing, which is everything we did so far was in a gain frame, right? Your agent's trying to get you something. What about a loss frame in which no matter what happens you're going to lose? Does this still happen? Okay, just to pick that off. This is the one that I want to get to, which is does having an overly optimistic agent come with a cost? And in particular, are you going to be overly likely to reject offers when you think you can get more? Okay, which could cause people to walk away from the table. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about why that might happen. Okay, so first of all, is it about choosing? So again, you could think it's a cognitive dissonance thing. I choose this representative who's really good, who says he's going to get me the world. And then I think to myself, I like him because I chose him. If I don't like him, then I was an idiot. Okay? So we did this again, only now the constituents, the people who are on whose behalf the agent is negotiated, are assigned an agent who's either optimistic or not. Okay? And the question is, do you still get the effect? Okay? So now we shift from, is it cognitive dissonance or is it Stockholm Syndrome? Okay? And the answer is it's Stockholm Syndrome. Okay? So basically this is just that relationship between, I'm just showing you now the relationship between the optimism and satisfaction, optimism and choosing the new agent. And the answer is I assign you an agent. If I assign you an agent who's really optimistic, you like them better. If I assign you an agent who's not so optimistic, you don't like them better. So it's not about choosing, it's about having an agent who you thought was really going to be fighting on your behalf. Okay. Does it work for losses? So now we picked two scenarios. One was a housing sale, which seemed, kind of realistic, less realistic now that the market's come back, but there was certainly a period of time. I don't know how bad it got here, and it never got real bad in Austin. But certainly there were areas of the country where people took a real bath on houses when the bubble broke. So one of them was, you're going to lose money on your housing purchase, how bad is it going to be? And then we also picked as another one a divorce situation, right? Which just feels like, you got somebody working on your behalf in a divorce, but either way you're losing money, right? Okay? So people they're expecting to lose money, and the question is, you're going to lose more than you think you're going to lose, or is somebody going to be agree with you about what you're going to lose? And the answer is yes, it works for losses. So the more optimistic your agent is, the more that you like them better at the end, even though you lose more than you thought you were going to. Okay? So divorce attorneys ought to tell you you're going to get everything. And then when you get a little tiny bit and you're living in a lean-to, you're going to be, I don't know, I love my lawyer though. Okay. This is my favorite though. Is there a downside? So part of the problem with the previous designs is that each negotiation is a single trial, okay? Which means your agent negotiates on your behalf, then you get an offer, and that's the offer you get. Which isn't really the way real negotiations work. In real negotiations, generally speaking, your agent says, I want this, and then their agent says, well, I'll give you that. And then you have to decide, okay, or I reject that offer, try again. Right? And every time that you reject an offer, there are two things that could happen. That person could come back with a better offer, or they could just walk away, and then there's no deal. Okay? So we wanted to have, in this design, we wanted there to be some degree of risk. So the payment people are going to get on MTurk for this is going to be dependent on whether they reach an agreement. Okay? And they can reject the offer up to 3 times. And what we did was to construct something. Yes?
Do they know they only have 3 rejections?
Yes. But the other thing that they know is that at any time people could walk away. And so what we're basically running is a variant of something called the balloon analog risk task. And if you look at studies of risk sensitivity, what you find, the way the balloon analog risk task works is, essentially you press this button and that puffs the balloon up one more time. The more that you puff the balloon up, the more points you get, the more money you get. But if you pop the balloon, you get nothing. Okay? We're doing a variant of this in negotiation, which is every time that you reject an offer, there's an opportunity for somebody to come back and offer you more, but at some point they may walk away from the table, in which case the negotiation blows up and you get nothing. Okay? And so so you're being risky. And we tell people explicitly, you walk away from the table too many times, and on each trial there's a possibility that they're going to walk away. You walk away from the table too many times, and this negotiation may blow up, and then you'll get nothing. Okay. And what they were getting was an MTurk bonus, so it was some a vanishingly small amount of money. Okay. What's important to know here, there's a couple of things that are important to know. Basically, now we're talking about the risk of how likely are you to reject an offer as a function of how optimistic your agent is going to be. And what we find in this study is people are more likely to reject offers when their agent was more optimistic. So essentially, you are emboldened by an agent who is optimistic. You are emboldened by that to reject offers that you see as non-standard. And what happens is, over the course of the study, people who are more likely to reject offers lose more offers. Okay? So there is a cost in this actual case for people who get an agent who's too aggressive. And then, because we live in a world of replication crises, I looked at this effect and I went, I was talking to Dan, my student. I was like, are we sure? Let's just run it again. So we ran it again. And the answer, so does it replicate? The answer is yes. It's always fun to get that answer. So what does this mean? It means, on the one hand, people like agents who agree with them. So there is some benefit to overpromising. We get this effect in a whole bunch of studies. It happens again and again and again. We're figuring out that it's pretty robust. It's been hard to break the effect, which is nice, again, in this world of failures to replicate. Having to choose explicitly doesn't matter much. It does create, though, an additional willingness to reject offers. We're still not 100% sure why this happens. It does seem like one of the things that does seem to happen is that having an agent who is more, who gives you a higher offer, we believe that they're going to be more aggressive on our behalf, and that aggression influences things. We tried a bunch of other things. We tried a study where we had people predict other personality characteristics of the agent. That didn't seem to affect anything. We did in all these studies behind the scenes collect a whole bunch of other personality measures to see if that influenced the strength of this effect. And the only one that we tried a ton. The only one that worked, and I'm always a little leery about these because it's hard to do these consistently, but we're going to start adding this one more, is that if you remember from a couple of years ago, there's a bullshit receptivity scale that came out, which is essentially how likely are you to buy. I mean, the original study that got done looked at people's willingness to believe in statements by Deepak Chopra, and found a relationship between their score on the it's called the BSR, and willingness to accept that. Of all the scales we ran, that one seems so the more receptive you are to BS, the stronger this effect seems to be. Okay, so again, I'm sure there are analogs in the real world, but I'm going to just leave that proof to the real. So we did look at that. And I guess at that, I just want to take a step back and say, okay, so like, what do you think? You know, I'd love questions and stuff like that, because we're in this ongoing research.